Good evening, everybody. Welcome. My name is John Bonning. I'm the Commercial Director here at the Building Centre. Welcome to Retrofit Meets Schools. It's the first of our talks programme this year, linked into our Retrofit 24 exhibition upstairs that hopefully you've had an opportunity to look around. If not, please do after the show or come back on another day. Couple of bits of housekeeping, as always. No fire drills this evening, so should you hear a continuous ringing alarm, please exit the way that you came in, and the Building Centre team will take you out. Secondly, please can you ensure your mobiles are switched off. We've also got a photographer in, so if anyone doesn't want to be in any pictures we may use for marketing purposes, let me know after the event. So Retrofit 24, it's about the reuse agenda for commercial, cultural and civic buildings. And we're asking that question, how do we stimulate the retrofitting of the 1.9 million buildings we have? And sort of put that into scale, that means we need to retrofit over 1,100 of these cultural venues, public buildings and commercial buildings per week. And I think, as we all know in this room, it's not happening. So over the course of the next 4 months, we will be delivering a range of talks, webinars and walking tours as well, covering a whole range of subjects in terms of how you deal with historic buildings, the role of ESG as a driver in the retrofit, product solutions, the use of data and collaboration, sharing information. So it's going to be very wide-ranging. You can see all the details on our website. We're uploading them at the moment, so www.buildingcentre.co.uk if you wish to register for future events. The need to undertake the retrofit of these buildings is, for many reasons, important. There's the moral imperative in terms of addressing climate change, but there's also the stimulus for the economy in terms of job creation and benefits for the economy at large. And thirdly, in terms of being a strategic requirement to undertake to ensure that we don't have stranded assets. And especially when you start thinking about schools, that we create spaces that are conducive to students to learn. I want to thank the speakers tonight. We've got a panel of speakers. We'd like to thank them for their time. And at the end of the presentations, the formal presentations, there will be a Q&A session, so please do hold your questions until the end. I'm going to pass you over to the chair for this evening and your host, Lara Newman, who's the Chief Executive of LocatED, who advised the Department of Education on its long-term strategy for an efficient education estate.
Hello everyone, thanks for coming out on a Wednesday night before Easter. I'm a bit kind of demob happy because after this I'm going on holiday until the 8th of April, so if I get a bit over enthusiastic, just bear with me. So thank you so much for the intro. So I'm Lara Newman, Chief Executive of LocatED, so we're an arm's length body to the Department for Education. Has anybody here heard of us? Hands up. Oh, that's pretty good. I'm quite pleased with that. So look, we do lots of things around the education estate. So that's nursery schools, further education. So we buy sites, we sell sites. We deal with surplus land to reinvest back into schools and into multi-academy trust and into local authorities. We also deliver mixed-use development. And historically, the kind of world of schools since LocatED existed and prior to that, so since 2010 when the free school programme existed, retrofit has been, quite the thing. So I used to produce this presentation called Does It Look Like a School? Because, of course, it didn't look like a school. Free schools, new free schools back from 2010, less so more recently, I would say, have gone into all sorts of buildings that have been repurposed for the use of education. So, churches, old mills, you know, anything you can think of, probation service offices, courts, so all sorts of things. And, you know, let's be completely honest, some of those have been converted in a more effective way than others. So I kind of, when I came in and saw the exhibition a little bit earlier, I had this immediate panic that when we talked about retrofit, and this is because I only read the first half of this quote, retrofit means upgrading a building to improve its energy performance. And I was like, oh my God, like, please, I know nothing about net zero. That's not quite true. I'll come on to that. But there was this kind of, because in my mind, you know, yes, there is the thing about the operational carbon, but it is also about how we keep these buildings, many of which have heritage value because of the embodied carbon, but also their value to the world at large. I'm not an architect. I'm not an expert on school design, but I do think that governments and us as part of that have a responsibility to ensure good civic design. And I think, you know, a lot of that we can achieve in certain locations comes from retrofitting and refurbishing buildings to a really good standard. So I think I'll just say on the net zero thing, which I'm not an expert on, but I was stood here not that long ago chairing a panel on net zero for LocatED's own net zero accelerator programme, which is essentially aiming to address the problem of energy performance across England, 22,000 schools in England, and 37%. There's an issue around the public estate. 37% of energy use in the public estate is through schools because of the numbers that we're talking about. So that's quite a serious stat. But also, coupled with that is the big issue around condition need. So there is a huge condition need in the school and the college estate, and we need to do those two things at once. So I panicked slightly less when I read the second half of that quote, and then I'd wander around the exhibition. But look, I'm going to leave it there because this is not all about me. Sometimes it is, but it's not today. So I'm going to introduce you to the panel in order of their presentation. So they're not going to come up at this point, so I will introduce them now, and then they'll come up in turn. You'll see their presentations. Get your thinking caps on for Q&A. So there will be an opportunity at the end for Q&A. I've been told that the panellists are allowed to speak for 9 minutes. But I've already heard that some of them aren't going to speak for 9.5 minutes. They're going to speak for more. So we'll just have to bear with those naming no names. So without further ado, the first person to speak tonight and deliver his presentation, John Ward of the Creative Education Trust. John has worked for a range of multi-academy trusts since 2007 on over 50 estates and facilities projects. So he actually joined the Multi-Academy Trust as a consultant to manage the construction of a new Michael Dixon building for Ash Green, and then joined on a full-time basis in 2018. So John will speak first, but I'll go through the rest of the panellists. So John, please don't get up. Not that you look like you were going to, but just as a bit of a warning. Niamh Cronin from Heyningen Haward Architects, over 10 years experience working in the education sector, both on new build projects and the adaptation of existing buildings to create exceptional teaching and learning environments. So Niamh was the associate for the Houlton School project in Rugby, something that we were also heavily involved in, and I personally am really proud of our involvement in this project. It is absolutely wonderful. I'm not going to steal her thunder. She's going to do an amazing presentation. She might be the one that's talking for more than 9 minutes, by the way, but it'll be worth it, I promise you. And so we move on to Dave Tiller from Ventrolla. So Dave is an industry stalwart, and he's got a brand in Chile, which I'm absolutely devastatingly jealous about. So Dave his world-renowned technical expertise is unmatched with 43 years in the fenestration industry. He's often called upon to speak at national events and delivers REBA CPD for Ventrolla. So we're very pleased to have him here tonight. He's worked for Ventrolla for over 15 years. He's a trusted expert. He oversees the Ventrolla Academy. That sounds fascinating. I'm not sure what it is. I probably should. I'll be asking you about it afterwards. Delivering training, CPD and technical advice to all surveyors. So not just new surveyors, people across the business. Excellent. And then finally, last but not least, so Lilia Oblitsova of ECD Architects. So Lily is a senior architect at ECD and a certified European passive house designer who is particularly interested in retrofit. She led a retrofit feasibility study relevant for our conversation today that looked at a selection of school archetypes in Brent, in the London Borough of Brent, aiming to develop common strategies that could be applied across the whole estate. And prior to that, she worked on various residential and mixed-use schemes in large London-based practices. So, John, over to you.
Good evening, everybody. Oh, the mic's just gone on then, I'm sorry. I do have a booming voice, so if it gets really too loud, just shout and say something. My name's John Ward. I'm the Director of Estates and Facilities for the Creative Education Trust. I'll move the slide on. Because I've got sort of two purposes of being here tonight, actually, because part of my life is not only am I director of a Estates and Facilities Creative Education Trust, but I also chair something called the Queen Street Group. And my boss started off something called the Queen Street Group with 5 of the major trusts in the country some 8 years ago. Now 45 trusts, and I chair the Estates Experts Group. So there was lots of John and Jane and Joe Wards that we get together on every 2 or 3 months to talk through our issues, our strategy concerns, and often we spend a lot of time talking about not having enough money. So what I want to do is look at the school estate. Okay, I want to present you tonight with where the estate is. Okay, so you're in no doubt as to some of the challenges that we face. So we'll talk about some of the numbers and the facts, some of the challenges, but also the complex responsibilities that we have. So my day, whilst you're away on holiday next week, I should be project managing and program managing all sorts of different activities across 17 schools remotely. So with my team and making sure that our investments are working towards what we need to do to provide children with you'll see lots of pictures like this as we go through, and I'll explain some of these as we go on. And I want to talk about opportunities and why it's so important, okay? Because it really is. It's a bit slow. What am I doing? So the exam questions around why we're here tonight is to be considerative of the product design, the innovation that we need to improve the efficiency and to move to a sustainable retrofitting arena, okay? When we talk about numbers, you'll see how complex and difficult that can be for us. I might have to start pressing buttons here. There you go. I want to touch on the collaborations that we will need to make with you as engineers, designers, architects, manufacturers, contractors, and so on. We need to emphasise the need for data and to make sure that we understand what it is that we're trying to measure, because if we can measure it, we can start to manage it. We need to repurpose our areas to meet the needs of modern education requirements. Today is very different. Tomorrow's 4 years from start of lockdown. Some of you remember what that was like 4 years ago, worrying about whether you can eat your food. Children behaviours are totally different in school nowadays. It's a different arena. We design buildings with big spaces and so on. We need small spaces now because we've got so much intervention activity and so much catch-up activity. We also need to consider the needs of our stakeholders and our communities. We have done too little of that, and we will touch on the practicalities of retrofitting in the different buildings we've got and the value of social impact. So I'm trying to move on as fast as I can. So the National Audit Office reports of 2023 showed we've got over 20,000 schools, which comes up to about 65,000 blocks, all different sizes. The National Audit Office and the condition data collection data show that the 60% of schools were built before 1976. My oldest one is 1908, got 1930. I've got 3 buildings that look as if they're going to fall down and they're 60 years old and they were designed for a 30-year life. I haven't got the money to rebuild them, so retrofit is going to be the right solution for that. There are 3,600 system build blocks of high concern, and I'll mention the word later on. They're clasp structure buildings. You've all seen clasp structure buildings. Does anybody know what clasp means?
Oh, I did about a week ago.
It's coordinated local authority specialist procurement. I always used to think it was something to do with wood and nails and bolts, but it's that. So local authorities in different regions took it upon themselves to work together to build a type of building that was affordable, that was built in mass volume on those dates. We've got 700,000 pupils learning in a school that requires major works. We've got 24,000 school buildings that are beyond estimated design life. I've got 8. I've got 8 very bad ones. Sorry, I've got 14 in total that are beyond life. Mechanical and electrical equipment being the largest need, followed by roofs, walls and doors. And estimate about 70,000 number of new school places needed by 27-28. So you can see what's happening in this sector. We've got all of this old stuff. We've got no funding, and we've got no clear view where the funding is going to be. But there is a retrofit opportunity for us to make. I would rather refit a building than knock it down and rebuild it, because the carbon impact is twice, isn't it? So, and there you can see some big numbers on how big the estate is. On condition data collection series 1, which is what the DfE do, in 2019 it was valued at 11.4 billion as the need. We're now on condition data collection number 2, and it's probably twice that. Let me finish with a couple of points. So we have the government has a target to cut emissions by 78% by 2035 compared with 1990 levels. We don't know what that means in schools for us. We don't know how to deliver it. Most of us haven't got strategies for it. Okay? But we're trying to work towards it. Estimated 1.5 billion spend on energy each year collectively by schools. So the energy crisis forced us into some major transitions and to move towards lots of retrofit activity, because my electricity bill went up from £912,000 a year to 3.3 million. Since then, we've saved 25% on 24.8% on electricity, 21.8% on gas. And that's just by switching things off and investing in the right kit. Sustainability is an expectation for the sector whilst trying to meet the condition need. We have got a massive condition problem in the sector. RAC has dominated the headlines, but we have other issues too, like asbestos and class structures, as we've mentioned. The revenue budgets and capital funding has been reduced in real terms, and the capital has just been, the funding has just been announced for 24-25, reduced from 6.3 billion to 6.1 billion. We haven't got more money going in, and in real terms, it's actually quite reduced. Spending review would be completed post-election period. So that means we've got 2 years of inertia. Okay? So sounds a bit gloomy. And it was quite interesting. One of the statistics I found was that our ability to drink tea dropped considerably in the period where we weren't rebuilding buildings. So an odd statistic, I know. So retrofit. I spent a lot of time, like Lara said. Oh yeah, okay. Like Lara said, I'm worried about some of the exam questions here, but I spent a lot of time looking at what retrofit really means, and we think we're doing this all the time. We're really doing lots of refurbishment, and if we're lucky, we get to a point where we're renovating. So we need to change our approaches. So let's just touch on the skills and competencies in schools. We're not that good. We're not architects. We're not engineers. Some of us are experienced and old. But we have a lot of other responsibilities to deliver too. We have a lot of statutory responsibilities to deliver. And my time is taken up in so many things that are just also beyond condition. But I get terrified of injuring children. Okay? And we've got some real challenges in some of our schools. You can read some of those other points down there. Okay, if we have further funding. We also have to go through a process of identifying and planning our investments. So we have something called the Good Estates Management Strategy, and that forces it into looking at strategic asset management. So when if you're thinking about selling into this sector, you really need to understand that we all work different ways, okay? Some schools, you'll go and talk to one bunch of people and they won't know half the things that you want to do with them or could do with them. And then you'll go to others, and generally the larger trusts that are seemingly more informed. It's just been announced this week, I've got 3.1 million for 24-25 for my school condition allocation for all 17 schools. okay? I need 77 million to deal with condition issues in the next 10 years. I'm going to get 31 million. It's only going to go one way, isn't it? It's only going to go backwards. So, loads of examples, won't bore you with it, but we do loads. Whether it be classrooms, PV, whether it be fenestration, whether it be drains. I was saying earlier on, we just, even drains, we've done retrofit there. That was our 1908 building. Dave, I'm sorry, I've already done the windows. But we brought that back to life, but that was a retrofit, actually, for us, because we changed the thermal properties of how the classrooms were working. And that was where we really were clever in measuring what we wanted to achieve. And toilets, and that's our net zero building, by the way. Then that was an old modular building that we retrofitted with a net zero building. It pays for itself and it's got a 60-year life. It was made in 5 days because I watched it being made. It was on site in 6 weeks. Finished. So let's talk about our priorities. We've got to manage our estate and meet our statutory responsibilities, which I've got to keep it safe, it's got to be purposeful, I've got to keep everybody dry, but I've also got to deliver other strategies like the ones around sustainability and so on. So I've got some very significant challenges. We want to reduce revenue expenditure where we can, because the two things that we're really interested in schools is how can we reduce our revenue cost, our burden, cost burden, or how we can improve outcomes for children. Okay? Because that's why we do it, is for children. We have a real challenge that so many of our buildings are beyond life. I believe we can retrofit a lot of those buildings. And I'm currently working with Premier Modular at the moment, looking at taking some of these old, on the class buildings, where you've got these big 2.5-ton concrete blocks on the side. Behind it, you've got a piece of paper, and then you've got classrooms. They're so thermally inefficient, it's untrue, that they're developing some net zero panellised solutions which we're looking to use. We need to put some strategies in place because we don't have anything consistent across the trust. Now, the Queen Street group that I mentioned earlier on, we've got our own subgroup at the moment where we are starting to talk about retrofit, and we're starting to look at other challenges associated with retrofit, which includes procurement. Because some of you may come up with a really great idea, but I've still got to take it through a robust procurement process. We need to increase the knowledge and skills base within the sector because we don't know enough. And somehow we need to create the environment where your great ideas and great minds can be used to deliver better strategies in those schools. So, closing thoughts. We love a badge and a plaque or an award. I don't know what it is about schools. They're very competitive by nature. They love league tables. So my appeal here is, could we not have some school retrofit project of the year awards or a quality mark or a kite mark, or do something with it, because I think you'd get much more buy-in because they'd see it's the way forward. Children get it, okay? Children are so there. I get challenged every time I go into a school from different groups because I've set up working groups with the campaigners on these different schools. They get it. Why aren't you doing this? Okay? I've got an 11-year-old daughter that challenges me all the time. Right, that's me. Thank you. I hope that was a scene set for you. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, John. And you're pleased to know Houlton School has won a plethora of awards, and the pupils and the staff are really proud of it. Is this a bit loud? Is it okay? It's a bit echoey in my head. Anyway, so thanks for the introduction, Lara. I am Neve Cronin. I'm an associate at Heyningen Haward Architects. And we specialise in education, everything from master planning to new build and retrofit. So this project, Houlton School, is particularly special to me. It represents 5 years of my working life, which I'm going to compress into just over 10 minutes. And it's a great example of the benefits of retrofit, not just from a low carbon perspective, but also the value it gives to a school and the sense of community and heritage within the school and the surroundings. So Rugby radio station is located just outside Rugby. We were approached by our client, Urban and Civic, master developer for Houlton, to see if we could convert this industrial building into a secondary school. So there was 3 aspects to the brief. The first was to make an exemplar state-funded secondary school for just over 1,200 pupils. The second was to minimise operational energy and therefore carbon emissions. And then the third was about celebrating the heritage of Rugby radio station at the heart of this new development of Houlton as the backdrop to the district centre. So just a quick bit of history. So it's a Grade 2 listed building. It was built in 1926. Its particular historic significance was that it was the first global radio transmission, and it was the first transatlantic phone call in the 1930s. So the setting, this is Houlton Development, which is 6,000 new homes by Urban and Civic, or master developer, and you can see in the background there, that is the radio station, which will become the civic centre of this new development. So working with retrofitting buildings, there's particular challenges to each building, be it listed or not. These are the particular challenges for the radio station. So we needed to identify what was significant, unique, and what needed to be celebrated, but we also had to be bold in how we did our interventions in order to unlock the opportunities and create exceptional education spaces. So understanding the fabric of the building, so it's an industrial building, it has solid masonry walls, steel structure, single glazing, absolutely no insulation and no heating. So it's not built to be occupied by children. So that was the first challenge. Early investigations and surveys, we discovered a lot of, lead paint everywhere on the walls and on all the steel structures, so that had to be removed, which actually helped with the internal wall lining strategy. And then the other thing is about these huge volumes of the power hall and the transmission hall. It's about how we divide them up so that it's best fit, and how we insert floors so that we're still making the most of these unique heritage spaces. So when we look at the brief for a secondary school and the footprint of the radio station, obvious from the start, it's not all going to go into that building. So we knew we'd have an element of new build, but what is best fit for this building? And the spaces that are a good fit for it are the gathering spaces, so assembly and dining hall, and then the more kind of flexible spaces, so performing arts, so drama, activity, art rooms, music, library, and sixth form. So how the campus then evolves is that you have gathering spaces in the power block, kind of performing arts and sixth form in the transmission hall, and then you put all your kind of cellular STEM subjects together in a STEM block, same for humanities, and then you have a separate sports hall, which is also located kind of on the edge of the site for good community access. So I'm going to play you a short animation. It's quite difficult to talk over, and I'm not going to get a job as a voiceover artist anytime soon. So these are the main volumes, as I described: power hall, water tower, and transmission hall. And then this is a section through the building as it was when we started working on it. You can see the amount of equipment that's in there, and the pieces of equipment that were significant were donated and repurposed where possible. And then this shows the kind of level of strip out and demolition to get back to the brick and steel structure. And then it's about the new intervention. So the existing steel is restored, and then new foundations to the restaurant hall, and then we're inserting 4 new floors, and then a new stair tower, because that building had absolutely zero circulation. Then it's about the thermal upgrade, so it's internal wall insulation and roof and slab insulation. And then reinstating historic elements, so the roof lights, the cornice, and then all the single glazed windows were replaced with replica double glazed. And we have a courtyard in the middle, and then this becomes the dining hall with the assembly hall, and then it's drama to the lower level, music, art, and then sixth form above. And then just as we zoom out, you can understand why, in terms of demolition of the link block, which was seen to not be as significant, we have a new entrance pavilion, which helps create this link with the civic square. And then we have clustered the new blocks around the heart space, that historic water tower, to create like a central play space in the playground. And zooming out to the wider master plan, I just wanted to show you the relationship of the radio station to the civic square, and that building really does become the backdrop, and it's so important because there is nothing there, and it is a new town. Also, it's worth mentioning that it was a closed site before, so although people knew about the building, not a lot of people had actually been into it. So we were involved at a very early stage, and we did have an influence over the master plan, which was great because it meant there was enough flex that the master plan could open up in certain places to make sure that the primary facades of the historic building, whilst within the school domain, can be appreciated by the wider community. So on low carbon and retrofit, so we took a fabric first approach, and so that's insulating walls, roof, floor, new double glazing, good air tightness, and then it's a fully mechanically ventilated building with heat recovery. And what that shows was, with those elements, the retrofitted radio station performs as well as a new build, it outperforms a new build built to 2015 regs. So it's absolutely possible. And then as a campus, the new blocks are highly efficient, and they have electric generation, and then it's point of use hot water. Just a bit of detail on the internal wall insulation. Because the external brick is moisture open, so it's not waterproof, we needed a breathable build-up for the insulation. So we have a lime plaster for for air tightness, and then a wood fibre and a finishing board. So, sorry, a point on that is it's a very simple solution in terms of the insulation, but the complexity comes with not insulating too much, having the right amount of insulation and everywhere. So there was a lot of woofy calculations that was done for that. And then to ensure that the brick sheds water and there's no risk of moisture ingress, there was an element of conservation and upgrade, as well as adaptations to the brickwork. And then also all the rainwater goods were replaced, and then the outlets are all increased in size. So single glazing is all removed and replaced with replica double glazing. It's timber to the transmission hall because there was electric spark in there, so that was what was in the historic fabric. And then in the power hall, it's metal. I just want to show you the extent of MEP kit within the building, and it's all within the building because of the listing. We couldn't put anything on the roof, so it's a particular challenge to this project, and it was a challenge, but we made it work. So point about de-risking a project program for retrofit, one of the things that we did was at stage 2, we made an application for a listed building application for intrusive investigations. And this did two things. It allowed us, the design team, to have assurance of assumptions, and also it allowed the contractor to give the client a fixed maximum price. The other thing we did was an advanced enabling works package before the main works, which dealt with demolition and decontamination. And then I'm just going to end with some images of the school in use. So this is the activity studio with the new stairs and the transmission hall. And then looking out from the stairs back into the school campus, into the playground. And then we have the transmission hall with sixth form on the top. And these are all the awards that the project as well. So yes, the school community, so pupils and staff, are extremely proud of this project, and it's working really well for them. And it's just a great example of, with, you know, care and attention to the right team, how, you know, we can take old buildings, historic or not, and upgrade them to perform as well as new buildings. And also it really adds something to the kind of urban fabric, which people are really proud of. And it's given this place a real sense of community and a real sense of history. So thank you very much.
Coming.
So's Christmas.
There we go.
It's on pear-shaped now. Okay, thank you very much, Neve. Hi guys, thanks for coming. Can you all hear me? Because I'm not used to speaking on a mic. But my name's Dave Tiller, as already has been stated. I work for Ventrolla. Just a bit of a brief history about Ventrolla. We are the UK's leading timber sash window renovation business. We've been renovating windows. We've been established in Harrogate in 1983, so established for 40 odd years in looking after old windows, old properties and draft proofing properties. We've undertaken 1 million projects in that period, estimated 6 million window renovations over that 40 years. So it's quite considerable. We work through 7 regional offices through the UK, or several, sorry, and we employ about 150 people. The Ventrolla name comes from a portmanteau of Ventrolla control. So Ventrolla control, pretty simple, but that's... So just to reiterate some of John's slides, I think, you know, and it proves our research as well. 21,600 schools have 64,000 buildings. 38% are past their initial design life. These can be extended if maintenance, upgrading, retrofitting. 24,320 schools, 320 more than you had, John. School buildings need retrofitting. The most sustainable building is the one that's already built. 17% of the UK's carbon emissions relate to buildings. Maintenance, periodic renewal, conservation, refurbishment saves 30 to 50% in carbon emissions. Undertaking performance upgrade can also save up to 40% in energy costs. We work on a number of schools and have done over the years, and the amount of feedback we get from teachers about being able to open the windows and let the children breathe for ventilation. And as we know, ventilation is critical for health. Although we want to keep them warm, we still want the windows to open. There's fire risk, and also to keep the children awake when there's ventilation. When they're being taught, that helps, doesn't it? 15% heat loss is from windows. So what do? So Timber Window Solutions, we offer timber window renovation. So if we're looking at timber windows, we've got to look to see if the timbers have sound in areas. Can we renovate it? Is it sustainable that we can repair it, that it's not going to fall to bits after several years and we're going to be revisiting it? So we have to take all this into account. We have to work with conservation officers, building planning officers, etc., on listed buildings. Performance upgrade options, that over the last several years has become very broad now. So some 15 years ago when I started out with Ventrolla, it was pure renovation, single glazing, draft proofing. Over that short space of period, we've got heritage double glazing, we've got vacuum glazing, Histoglass, etc. All of these products, some listed building or a lot of listed building officers, conservation officers, have trouble utilising them. So, you know, we have people designing these products. We can, and I'm a very stalwart as well in looking after our heritage, because once it's gone, it's there for our kids, kids. So once it's gone, it's gone. So I'm very precious about what we do, how far we can go. And there's a common sense approach as well. When we look at some of these buildings, sometimes the windows are just absolutely shot. It's very rare. A lot of these windows are built out of pitch pine, so they've been there longer than I've been born, and they will see me out as well, as long as they're looked after. So the first typical window we see, as you probably saw on a couple of those slides, is the Georgian window. A couple of reasons that it's like this is the inability to produce larger panes of glass. King William III introduced a window tax, then the poor window was taxed again with a glass tax, so the window was heavily taxed, hence the term daylight robbery. So you see people cleverly brick their windows up, and they are listed now, so you can't take those bricks out and put windows in. We go on to the Victorian period, so we've got the ability to produce larger panes of glass. All the taxes are abolished, but now we find we've got a heavy bit of glass, and we see an introduction of the horn detail. So predominantly that's put there for strength, so you've got a tennant joint in there, but it left a horrible square bit of wood at the bottom. So that's why you've got all different details of the horn. The reasons we get called in, schools, hospitals, domestic, all over the place, is noise, drafts and rattles. If you're lucky enough to have your windows working, you will have those three: noise, drafts and rattles, and actually dust. If you're on a busy high street, you get dust and dirt coming through as well. Because these windows are difficult to maintain, and again, I go back to schools, they've been painted shut over the years, they've had wrong decorators in and not always chosen correctly who's going to carry out the work, so they paint the windows shut. Then it's got a sparring effect, the window will go rotten, the teachers can't open the windows to cool the kids down and to get them to learn again. The last three, failure to meet for performance standards. So on a listed building, we're not going to... So the building regs on a new window, we're not going to be able to put it in a listed building. So there's a bit of a conflict there, but there are products where we can meet halfway house, if that makes sense. I'll quickly run through this, but this window is on a garage door, and the reason it's on a garage door because does everyone know what a window going in check means? A window going in check means that at 1774 there was a Building Act passed that consolidated all the other building acts at that time, and it put all the timber windows behind the face of the outside brickwork, and it was because of the Great Fire of London. So it was taking the wood from outside and bringing it inside. So that's why you can see these white lines here, and this here is the bit that was behind the bricks. The reason that's on a garage door is because it's in a property now opposite New Street Station in Birmingham, and the contractor 9 years ago took all the windows out, put them in a pile, was going to burn them, etc. Local council, building control, conservation officer shut the site down, completely shut it down. So that's why it's on the garage door. And that's why it's opened up at the top, because it's not in its aperture, it's just... So it's a bit of poetic licence for marketing, if you like. So what we've done is we've renovated that window. 7 of those windows are back in situ now, but it's drafty, it's rattly, so it's got the 3mm gap around it, so it's very drafty, you can open it. So what that equates to, 3mm gap all the way round, 1200 by 1800 window standard is equivalent to 200mm hole in the wall. So you can see why people, when you seal that up, it gives you a 30% increase, which I'll get on just with the single glazing. This little device was designed at the same time the system was designed, and it's a sash release system. So what a lot of people do is, because they can't maintain the windows, if they take the cords off that would be nailed or screwed on, let the cord go, it falls down the back of the box. So everyone doesn't like painting them, they paint them in situ, then it gets stuck, and then it goes rotten, and then we go down that spiral. That's why we've had a business for 40 plus years. So... And a decorating business on the side. All right, okay. Yeah. So that little device there, you can unclip the cords. This part here is a brake. So if you've got a very large window, some of them 3.5 metres, you can pull the brake up there, let it go, and then you've still got the bit that goes into the sash, so you can pull it down. So we've designed the system so it can be draft-proofed and maintenance going forward to stop it getting to that position it was when we found it, if that makes sense. So what that means, we've had to verify this, and we tested it on a house in Leamington Spa. So the BBA for U values, air changes, Oxley conservation, and Hans Tucker for sound testing. Am I doing all right for time, Laura? Yeah. Okay. So to be fair, draft-proofing a single glazed window improves the energy efficiency of that window by sealing that 200mm hole up by 30%. So, but what it does do, and we found more now, well, it was at the time, is you've still got a glass value of 5.8 U value. So we've sealed the drafts up, but now with all these new products, heritage double glazing, vacuum glazing, etc., we can increase the efficiency of the windows, of the existing windows. So reduced air changes, and obviously if you're filling up the gaps, you're reducing the noise as well. So, you know, it is 6 to 10 decibels is termed significant, although sound is very subjective to all of us. So you remember I said about windows in check. This is very important. So people think that, yeah, I can rip my window out and put a new window in. Well, this is the result. If it goes in from 1774 that way, inside, then all this lovely woodwork and plasterwork goes in after it. So if you take that window out, what that shows you there is all that, I don't know what that window, it could be plasterwork, woodwork, it's irrelevant, but the carbon footprint of that window has just got a lot bigger. So you see, it's very important. If we can retrofit an existing box, we can achieve a lot more, which we do with schools up and down the country. The trouble with schools, we have to work in the summer holidays, and everyone wants it done in the summer holidays when we're all on holiday. So just to give you a brief overview of the energy. So if we're just renovating a window, so 15 years ago when I joined the company, this was very topical, very low energy we're using to to put the draft proofing in, because we're travelling there, we're not doing a lot. If you can see, it's self-explanatory, but when I moved from London to Birmingham, if I tell you now that some councils are on their 3rd generation of PVC, the 1st generation is definitely in landfill before the government woke up and sort of said, we've got to do something about this. So that shows my age, because I was working in the fenestration industry from 20 years old, and I'm 64 this year. I had to think about that. So what I would like to do is just finish on a couple of recent projects we've done. Pretty much like the school that you showed, John. We worked on King Edward VI College, Handsworth. We worked with the trustees. We worked with the school. We worked with everyone to make sure that we got what we needed to deliver. So, believe it or not, this building isn't listed, but that hallway is quite fantastic. So how it's not listed, I don't know. But anyway, we 73 traditional windows. So we did a mixture of renovation and replacements. Pretty much what you had, Neve, we did double glazing windows, but copied glazing bars, etc., to make sure we got the aesthetics of that school. And that's ongoing. We've got quite a bit of work. So this was built about circa 1860. Obviously, the results, and I won't take any more time going over the results, but I think it's self-explanatory. This was quite interesting. This was a school in Romford. So the front part there was built 1779. It's got a very lot of history to it. So we were absolutely nailed down that all we could do was draft-proof that with the single glazing and replace the glass for old glass as well. But the late 19th century addition there that you can see went down, it had cloisters leading up to that building on the inside of that. We were asked if we could copy the windows in the cloisters and replicate them there, which we did. So it was a win-win all round, and we met all the standards there. So, and again, I think it speaks for itself. So I hope I've kept to time, Laura, and I'm not going to get ish. But if you want to see any of the products, so we've got the vacuum glazing is very new, but we have got some samples on one of the stands as you walk out, so you can have a look at it. Okay. All right. Cheers. We've got a bunch of little shit now.
Thank you, David. Let me just start this up. So my name is Lilia. I'm here to talk about the project we were briefly involved in, which was a feasibility study for Brent Council. But I'll start with a quick introduction. So I'm from ECD Architects. We are known as the low energy building specialist. We've been around for about 44 years. We currently support a range of clients with their domestic retrofit as part of PAS 2035. We also do new build schemes, including passive house, and also we do a number of advisory roles to the large estate landlords to help them produce these net zero climate resilient plans. We've got a number of offices in the UK, including Preston and Glasgow. Our Glasgow team has recently undertaken some net zero estate planning for University of Strathclyde, for example, but also for East Renfrewshire Council to support them on their school decarbonisation. Our London office has recently delivered this new build school, and it was delivered in partnership with our sister company, Keegan's, who are a multidisciplinary company with retrofit coordinators, retrofit assessors, surveyors, and project managers and cost consultants on board. The key thing about this school is that it is predicted to deliver 75% operational savings, and that's because it was designed as a passive house school. It has been certified as a passive house school as well. And to those of you who are not familiar with the passive house concept, there are 5 key principles. So the first one is that you need to have really good windows. They typically are triple glazed in this climate. You also need to have a very consistent and continuous thermal envelope. So you need to have good levels of insulation. You need to have good air tightness. And you need to control how your walls and floors and roofs meet so that there's no thermal bridges. And lastly, you need to put in a ventilation system that is efficient, so that it doesn't dump the heat outside, but recovers it. So it needs to be a really high efficient mechanical ventilation system. So it's a comfort-based standard, and it typically is measured in space heating demand, and it is quite stringent, so typically it applies to new build. However, there is a version for retrofit, which is NFIT. And this tends to be like the starting point whenever we think about retrofit. We think about what it would take, what measures we would need to take it to retrofit and then dial back. So now as to the project that I'd like to present, this is the 5 schools we looked at for Brent Council, and there was a real range in school building typologies. They had been pre-selected for us by the client as examples of their stock. So there were system-built buildings with a number of temporary pavilions. There were historic buildings adjacent to new build as recently as 2010, for example. There were traditionally built buildings next to listed churches where there were obvious constraints on the appearance, and there were a real diversity in the typology. So this particular one had separate dining halls, nurseries, education centres, and even a swimming pool. We inherited some data from the client and from the previous consultants involved in looking at the energy efficiency of these schools, and there was some metadata available. We tried to analyze and convert it into energy use intensity so that we could make comparisons to the LETI standard, for example. So you can see all of the schools we looked at, they exceed the energy use intensity, and the second one, for example, that was the one with system-built construction, lots of temporary buildings. It was really difficult to decipher and analyze it any further because the buildings weren't sub-metered, so we realized we needed a proper kind of method to approach the retrofit for all of the 13 buildings forming part of the 5 schools. And we condensed it down into 3 typical archetypes. So you had the traditional building, which could only support internal wall insulation, had pitched roofs, so you would insulate the loft and the roof, and you had hybrid buildings which looked traditional but perhaps weren't as important, so you could apply external wall insulation, and you had the modern ones where there was a flat roof and they could support EWI. You'll note from these diagrams that there was no floor insulation proposed because we thought it would be super disruptive, so instead we just continued the insulation below the ground, and right in the center is the ventilation. Ventilation is super important, and natural ventilation doesn't seem to be very reliable, so it was a key aspect of the proposal. As part of the study, we went away and did a desktop study. It was really interesting to scrutinize the development of these schools. They developed over time. There were a number of different wall types, and we had to make assumptions about what their current performance was. And it was also very important to listen to the kind of the caretakers and staff, because they were a good source of anecdotes. So, for example, in one of the schools, it was apparent that there was a window that was fixed open and nobody could get to it, and it was left open for years, and it was losing heat. And in the other one, it was common practice to keep the windows completely open and have the heating on maximum output because it was post-COVID and ventilation was so important. So there were a lot of inefficiencies in how the building was operated. So we kind of summarized for each building what we thought the current U value or the performance of the fabric element was, and what the aspiration would be. So that for the deep fabric improvements, so for example, cavity wall could be reduced to 0.11, but also you could have an easy win option, which is typically cavity wall insulation, for example. You may have seen in the exhibition a number of thermal imaging photographs, and this just helped us to piece together what the thermal envelope of these schools was. So, for example, in this one on the left-hand side, you could see that there was some loft insulation because we can see a change in color. So we followed the passive house methodology for each of the 13 blocks. We created a PHPP model, which is an essential part of this passive house NFIT process. And this was done with the help of 3D, so a model in SketchUp, Design PH, which is then linked to an Excel-based spreadsheet that calculates the specific annual heating demand. So it's a very kind of how should I put it, theoretical study in a way. It gives you a sense of what is possible. And you can see that we've got this benefit target running along the base, and all of the 13 buildings can come close to it, apart from the swimming pool, which we anticipated would need something much more than just fabric upgrades to do it. Halfway through the project, I got a phone call, and I was asked about, from the client, asking about how cavity wall insulation fits into the retrofit plan, and I realized that there were some funding constraints that kind of directed which measures were being implemented, and I thought it was really important to show and demonstrate the effect of these easy wins, just loft insulation and cavity wall insulation in the overall plan. And with our sister company Keegan's, we put together like a long shopping list of all the potential measures, and it was costed, and the client was really pleased because they could then take all of the measures and see what it would mean for each of the schools, because it was per meter square. So that worked really well, and we tried to adopt a step-by-step approach. And you can see here that the easy wins, they do not result in significant drop in energy demand. So only when you get to deep fabric improvement that includes wall insulation and roof, you can get a significant net zero ready building. So if we were to continue this project, we would implement the so-called maintenance plan. We acknowledge that replacing components ahead of the obsolescence is not very carbon friendly. So this is actually an approach that is advocated by Enefit. So it's part of their kind of typical approach. And you can see that there's these elements, and there's a date of the last renewal, so you can plan ahead. So we've been doing this for a number of residential landlords and also non-domestic landlords, where we help them analyze when the components are actually due for replacement, so the retrofit phases could be timed to coincide with that. So what we have also found is that it's not just the space heating demand that tends to dominate. In case of dining halls, it's the cooking and dishwashing that also needs to be looked at. And even though this particular building was covered in PVs, the whole roof was covered in PVs, our estimates show that in terms of the carbon offset through these PVs, you can see the green, it's nowhere near enough to cover the impact of the cooking and the hot dishwashing, basically. So to summarize, some of the larger schools that we looked at, there is potential to save 170 tons of CO2 per year, which is similar to producing 6 tons of cheese per year. So you may be wondering what 6 tons of cheese looks like. So my calculation suggests it's about 150 wheels. But more importantly, it's equivalent to 550 people giving up cheese for a year. And that's probably roughly the school community, you know. And it just shows you that retrofit of buildings is only one part of a school's decarbonization strategy. There's so many other things that need to be looked at. And this is why, as part of our engagement in this process, we delivered talks and speeches and workshops to all of the students of all of the 5 schools. They were really well received, and we like doing that. Just yesterday, some of my colleagues were in Nottingham delivering similar kinds of presentations about climate change and the role of retrofit. So if you have a school in mind that would benefit from such a presentation, please come and see me afterwards. Yes, so thank you very much.
Just going to let Laura shuffle the chairs for a bit. I've got a couple of questions. Just put your hands up if you've got questions, so I can get a gauge of... Is that allowed, Josh? Okay, right, good. But first off, I'm going to ask should we give the panellists another round of applause? Yeah? Let's do that. I'm actually not going to sit down, if you don't mind. Right, can I ask you back to the stage, please? And am I right that we're asking the panellists to go in the order in which they... Right, can you remember? Yeah, there we go. So, topical based on what Lilia just said, but I was really interested. So one of the things I was going to raise, and these are, I mean, we're running working with the DFE to run a net zero accelerator programme to address the kind of decarbonisation of the 22,000 schools we're talking about. That sounds like quite a big project, it is. So two things I want to just ask the panellists about in relation to that. So Lilia, you mentioned about the green skills thing. So how do green skills and the education piece, can you just expand a bit on that and then see if any of the other panellists want to come in? So the green skills element in terms of retrofit.
Yes, so obviously investing in the new generation and sharing your knowledge is a key part. So we've enjoyed explaining climate change and where retrofit fits in and the role of the architect to inspire young students to consider that as a career as well.
I mean, John, you said that kids get this.
Oh, I often go into schools and I do assemblies with children, particularly in Hart School where we did a net zero building. And it was staggering, just the interest that came up. And since then, I now get an email probably once a week from that school, from somebody in that audience, year 7, year 8, my daughter's about the same age, with, have you thought about this? And why are the doors always left open? And, you know, why are in the kitchens, it was interesting just listening to the kitchens, we've got kitchen extractors that have been on for 12 years, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, because nobody knew where the switch was. So it's the necessity is the mother of invention. When you have to start cutting costs and saving money, then you start looking at these things a bit differently. But the children know it, and the children are picking it up at primary school, and they're much more adept at it than we are, and much more challenging.
Thank you. So I think the other thing, so there's the low-hanging fruit element, which is not very costly, which is the behavioural change thing, which we've all talked about. But then the sort of deep retrofit, the material element, you know, essentially, I think everybody's talked about budget here, as in budgets are tight. You know, there's whatever it's £13 billion underspend on school condition improvement, and as John said, that was, you know, that's moved on from yeah. So we've got a big problem. So do we need to get some funding from the private sector for this stuff?
Ooh.
Who wants to start with that?
This is why your net zero accelerator programme was.
Well, I know, but that's why I'm asking you the question, because I'm the chair and you're on the panel, John, and you were at the summit, weren't you?
I was at the summit, and we're very excited about it. But it needs a culture shift, because when we talk about sustainability, I've got people that go straight into air source heat pumps and ground source heat pumps and other things, and there is so much more that we can do. One thing we don't want to do is knock down a building that we've already built. And so retrofit, I think, is really important to us.
Thank you. And Dave, just on the school holidays bit, one of the things, I mean, I think both of the examples you showed were they looked like they were in the independent sector to me as a state school girl. I don't know if they are or they, but it's a really interesting challenge, the school holiday thing. But there are lots of urban areas that have got a massive problem with falling rolls. So there's surplus places on school sites. So we're looking at the opportunity to look at serious kind of redevelopment of those sites whilst there aren't many kids. You can move all the kids onto one site and then do a proper redevelopment. Yeah. But the problem is you lot are all on holiday. So is there, I mean, I suppose the question is, I mean, how big and important a sector is the school sector for your organisation?
Yeah, it's very big. I think the thing with us is, or any company is if we're proactive and not reactive. So a lot of schools are reactive because their windows are shut and it's like, you've got to do it now. But if there was a programme like you've shown, then we can all deal with that. It's not a problem. I mean, joking aside about school holidays, but everyone wants everything done in the school holidays. But if we've got a bit of a plan, then we can work around anything. It's just planning.
Okay, so questions from the floor. Can you please, when the roving mic comes to you, say who you are, what organisation? I'm banking on a question here. Josh? Yes, please. Well, it might be I'm hoping it's for Niamh, but I could be wrong.
Not for Niamh. My question was essentially about data, because I think you made the point that you need to use data. And as architects, my biggest frustration is the data loop isn't ever done. We're never in the situation of speaking to 45 academy trusts who tell us, oh, our catering load is X. So I wonder if there is a forum that is trying to do that, because with that, if you like, benchmarking data, we can make a case. Without it, we can't.
No, we've just started, actually. We've just launched our first. This necessity is a mother of invention. I'll keep repeating that phrase. We have to reduce costs on energy consumption. So we've targeted the low-hanging fruit, and we've found so many areas where we can save money. The half-hourly monitoring on schools is absolutely critical. And I've got every meter, I've got half-hourly. And when we start looking at the data, we can see where our problems are. And that has forced us into... Now we've got to that next stage of measuring the thermal efficiency of our building. And that is quite challenging because a lot of our buildings are basically concrete shells. We're heating up concrete on the outside of a building.
We retrofitted a building at Chelmsford College, which turned out the entire building had an average U value of 6.
I'm not surprised.
And that's a 1960s school that they've just taken over.
But we'd claim that we're retrofitting boilers to keep the buildings. It's madness. So, but we are where we are, and we've got to take that. We will be doing some more work as a group of trust in the Queen Street Group to measure our building performance.
Well, all I can say is I think the architectural profession would love it if you published it.
Come and help us.
Love to.
I think just, John, with your point about now that you can measure things, one of the things that we found at Houlton was it has a BMS system, there was a soft landing and things, but I think we missed a trick in that there wasn't a job description for the new FM manager, and they aren't reading the data, and they don't have the skills. So whilst we're saying that the younger generation, they are really interested in it, and I think as they come up, we won't have this problem.
Well, I think there's an important point about skills development. I think it was Dave was talking earlier on about, because you've got Skills Academy there, and I think that's where we've got to invest. And that's one of the things that we'd like to look at, to make sure that we have got good people coming through. I don't call my people caretakers anymore because they're not taking care of anything. That I need facilities managers, but they need to be skilled and competent to do so. And we've done some work on competence frameworks. So we are going in the right direction. We just don't have the funding that we need to be able to deliver the change that we need at the pace we need.
Yeah, there was a question over here. Thank you.
Actually for Niamh. Also, thank you, Lara, for your fantastic chairing. So my question is around Houlton School. I saw it in the publication Community Schools by Sharon Wright and Helen Taylor, which is a kind of using it as an example for sort of mixed-use buildings and mixed-use schools. And you mentioned about the kind of community aspect, and I love the idea of school as kind of like a civic centre. So I wanted to ask what the role of kind of partnerships with local community organisations played in the process of developing the school. And then also this kind of links to Lara's question about funding, whether they played a role in any way in kind of helping fund the project, or if that's an area that could be utilised in the future.
So there wasn't any community funding. In terms of engagement, there was early engagement with a large amount of stakeholders, but because there wasn't a community within Houlton, we did consultation, and it was hugely well received because, as I said, it was a closed site and everyone was so interested to see what it's like inside and what its next chapter was going to be. I think it being used as community facility is actually really down to the trust. The trust see it as an asset, they are cash strapped, and it's a way for them to have a kind of a steady, another revenue income, but also to connect with their community, which they're really keen to do. So before we had the trust on board, so up to about stage 2, it was just TAs, and they were like, community use is not, it's it's not a part of the brief, and we were like, it absolutely should be. And then once we had the trust on board, they were like, yes, we definitely need this building to work for community use. It doesn't shut its doors at 4 o'clock. It needs to work on the weekends. So we worked with them to understand what they needed, and then how the building could run as seamlessly as possible with as little people running it as possible, so that they can have it open for as long as possible. And the rentals are great, and it's used a lot, and it's quite simple access control, and they've employed the right people to run that side of things. So it has. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's really interesting. It kind of shifts my perception of the role of partnerships from kind of the pre-funding or like pre-building stages to the more funding during use. I don't know if that makes sense.
It's a complex stream of different budgets. That's Lara's the expert on this. I think she's the country's foremost leading authority on how to bring stuff back. But you are, aren't you? That's what you do. But it's difficult because you'll have different streams of funding that you can't access at the right time. So.
Other questions? Here at the front, and then gentlemen in the... Are those mustard? I can't quite decide what colour those trousers are. But you next.
Hi, I'm Ruben. I'm an architect from Estra Hub, and I'm currently working on some funding proposals to the EU under Horizon Europe for R&D demonstrators. And the brief from the European Commission is that they want prefabricated components to be used in retrofit projects to speed up the time on site, which I imagine would suit the school summer holiday window quite well. And I've been out of the UK for the last 2 years, so I'd be interested to know if there are any examples of this actually happening or kind of progress in that direction, because it seems to me quite ambitious, because retrofit comes with all those challenges, dealing with existing buildings, different kind of shapes and conditions and of the actual building. So, I mean, there are digital techniques that they'd like us to use, but I'd like to know if there are any good examples.
Yeah. Who's going to answer that? John?
I've got one, because we did our net zero building, which started off with a collapse of an existing building. The collapse of the building meant that we had to take children out of that it was about the February time of 2022. I did the fag packet sketch and the adjacency diagram of what type of accommodation we want, how much space we need. By April, we'd engaged then with architects. Derek's down the back there, so Derek is our technical support for that, and led and supported us through that. We submitted planning application on 14th of April. We knew people in the local planning authority. We got planning approval on 28th of April. My birthday's the 6th of June. I went on site in Beverley. I watched the fifth of the 5 units being made. They were put on a lorry on the 29th and 30th of January with first fix. Toilets in, lights in, cables in. So I arrived on site and were finished on the 15th of April, 15th of August. So, I've spent years chasing builders around, making sure that they're not sitting there drinking cups of tea and they're actually building something.
Any builders in the room? Hands up? Yeah, sorry about that.
Tea drinker, yeah. So the modern methods of construction, I think, are really important. I think it's a route, and we can't manage all of our projects during the summer holidays, so what we do is take a very different strategy now. We close off parts of the building and work on our buildings all the way through the year. So that's why Easter's so important to us, but we've been starting it from half term, where some of our... So more kits that can come in to change it, the better, in our opinion. The trouble is, all of our buildings are different. Yeah. There is no... I mean, you saw the combination of 15 buildings there. I can match that. But they're all different. They're all different beasts. They've got different building management systems, different window systems. I've got one that's even got an unusual brick, and we can't work out how that happened. It's a metric brick. Have you ever seen a metric brick? Yeah. Yeah. So, I
expect the builder house drinks too much tea. I bet you've seen a metric brick. Gentlemen in the non-mustard trousers, can't quite decide.
Did you also mean in terms of prefabricated elements to go within an existing building?
Yeah, that was the main just. components that are made in a factory elsewhere and they're taken to an existing building.
I mean, I think we do a lot of that with boilers, with mechanical, electrical distribution systems and so on. So that will come in and kit form and be loaded in. It's about us having the skills and competence to know what we need that's going to make most impact.
Yeah.
Okay.
We looked at, with the internal wall insulation, we looked at different different strategies, and one of them was a kind of secondary wall inside, but it didn't really have legs for this building. And I don't know if Josh can think of a good example.
I think it's a slightly different issue, but for me, the thing is to employ digital technologies, because when people think of prefabricated, they think of either modular or repetitive. Yeah. And the very definition of the school estate is nothing repeats, ever. Yeah. So you've got to use a prefabrication technique that basically leverages the ability to scan something to the nth degree, replicates it off-site, and it will fit when it turns up. Yeah. If you can crack that, you're going to make an absolute fortune. Yeah.
Over here. What colour do you think your trousers are?
I've never really, just a brown,
Yeah, okay, I'm sorry about calling them mustards.
An autumn brown.
Autumn brown.
Thanks. I'm Tony from Love Design Studio. We're a sustainability consultancy based in Farringdon. We've worked on a few school projects and spent quite a lot of time looking at the overheating risk in schools and other buildings. I was just wondering what level of consideration is given to overheating risk in these school buildings with the retrofit. Particularly, you can have classrooms with quite a lot of children in them, and trying to avoid having active cooling systems in there as well.
Yeah.
Who wants to go first on that? Lilia?
I mean, it was a consideration, but it was a very early stage process. We didn't have access to dynamic simulation to test certain kind of rooms for overheating, but it was a rule of thumb. If it's south-facing and windows aren't shaded, then something needs to be done. And sometimes it could go hand in hand with some landscaping improvements to kind of benefit the well-being as well. So it doesn't have to be a cooling solution necessarily. Yeah.
I think also, if I can say, is that we've introduced document F now with trickle vents at the top of, because people don't open their windows. I think, if you can open your windows and self-regulate, some of these buildings are old and they're thick brick walls, they've got great big cast iron radiators, great big pipes, which themselves are radiators, they're radiating heat. So just to open the windows and let that ventilation, whether it's domestic, commercial, but especially schools. Some of the schools we've worked on, and the teachers saying it's so nice to have that airflow when the kids are staying awake. And I sincerely mean that. We've had that comment.
I remember COVID, when half of our schools didn't have windows that could open. And it was we were closing schools because we couldn't get enough air in there. So, and we were putting up tents outside and everything else. So there's that side of it. I think the other thing I always watch out for is when somebody wants to change a courtyard, fill it in. So courtyards are there for air circulation around a building. So, and they just see it as an opportunity to throw up a shed. So
at Houlton, as I said, it's a mechanically ventilated building, but because of the restriction of space internally, we needed windows and roof lights to open for purge. So that's how we deal with the overheating there. Yeah.
Okay, I'm conscious of time. It's 1:30. I'm going to get told off for running over. But I told you that it was probably a mistake to let me do this tonight when I'm about to go on holiday. But Dave, how many? I might come to you in a second, actually, just because I'm feeling. How many windows did you say that your company had been involved in renovating or refurbishing?
So well over 6 million.
Do you know how many windows there are in the country?
Go on.
I don't. I just thought you might. It seemed like the sort of statistic you might.
No, I don't. I mean,
pub quiz answer.
Yeah, I don't. I think, when I start.
Maybe your academy needs to get a little bigger.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, but the academy, I think, we all know we've got a dying. We haven't got skill sets coming through. If you look at us in particular, a lot of elderly people like myself, all-time serve. We've got to encourage younger people to take up these skills. There's a lot of skills in looking after these old buildings, and we haven't got that coming through, and that's important.
64 is not elderly, just for the record. I'm not having that on the video. Dave said he's elderly at 64. Gentleman with the red glasses, final question, please.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Ian. I'm an architect. We've got a couple of projects upstairs in the exhibition, not in the education sector. I was struck by a few things, and this is kind of observations, which might lead to a question at the end. The Houlton School, which we're big fans of, obviously. You beat us to some awards, so well done. But you know, you did have the advantage of, this is taking nothing away from how good it is, by the way. You did have the advantage, as you said, of it being a vacant site, and you could take a run at it. 100%. And, you know, that is very different to the challenges the Trust is suffering with, you know, schools and limited periods and all those sorts of things. And I guess, given that you're trying to sort out buildings that had like a 30-year span and they're actually been used for 60-plus years and so on, there is a kind of danger that with these compressed timescales to deliver the work, that we're only going to create a problem that will be overused, won't be designed or delivered well enough to last as long as it should. And then the point Laura made earlier, which was with falling roles, is there actually capacity within the schools to actually allow this to happen? How do all of those conflicting issues kind of come together, and there's a strategy where they can be delivered properly and robustly, that we can all do a proper job on these retrofits that we all enjoy doing and are good at, to make it last the long term? How is that captured and driven forward?
I mean, on the surplus places thing and the falling roles thing, I think I would just watch this space on that, because I think we have, you know, we have a once in a lifetime opportunity to really do something. Where the money comes from, I don't know, but you know, that's a kind of policy thing that needs to be worked through. We're in a very interesting year. You might have spotted that. Does anybody want to pick that up?
I was determined not to mention the G word tonight, government, but we do really need some leadership and some target setting there, and it's apparent that they're not in that position to do so, but I think we have to wait for the spending review to see what comes out the other end of that. In the meantime, help us to get the best out of what we got.
All right, I'm going to get properly bollocked for going four minutes over time, but should we give our panel a massive round of applause? John's just going to say goodbye to you in a much more polite way than I would.
And again, just to thank the panellists and Lara for tonight. We are open for half an hour, so you've got time to look around the exhibition if you wish, or if you want to come back on another day, my colleague Laura Broderick and myself would be delighted to show you and your teams around. So again, thanks for coming. Keep tuned into the website to see the forthcoming events, and hopefully we'll see you in person or online again.